way this is ever going to... Somebody, I think Milton Friedman once said it. It doesn't matter who you elect. The only way things will ever change is when it benefits politicians to cut spending rather than increase it. And our whole system right now is still based on bringing home the bacon. Even these newly elected Tea Party candidates have already started talking about... Rand Paul in Kentucky says he'll vote for any earmark that benefits Kentucky.
Wow.
Well, how is that helpful? I mean, it's not. So you've got to turn that whole equation around. The bragging rights have to go to the guy that saves us money, not the guy that spends our money.
Amen.
And we haven't done that.
Well,
Are you going to be that guy?
Yeah, present company
Absolutely.
excluded.
Absolutely. I've laid out a plan, unlike either one of the gubernatorial campaigns, of how you can cut at least $14 billion out of the budget.
We'll reward you for every dollar.
You retro budget. You move the budget back to the previous biennium. It's $14 billion less. You tell all agencies you can expect to have this. You can furlough people. You can cut programs. You can cut employees. Whatever, you have that discretion. But we do not have the money to fund you. And I think those are the kind of things that need to take place. The federal government needs to roll theirs back about a decade and cut programs and cut employees just so we can absorb all the spending that's taking place.
Yeah.
So
back to the Clinton years. That's our slogan, right? That made you uncomfortable, I know. But
yeah,
you said a decade.
I'd rather go to the Ronald Reagan years. You know?
Go more than a decade.
Yeah, it'd be 2 decades.
We got more Gang of Four coming up for a Friday morning. It's 10:24 on KTS. It's 10:30 on San Antonio's News Talk Station 550 KTSA. On Gang of Four today, State Representative-elect Lyle Larson, who's already just taking a beating, already been called a politician.
I mean,
yeah, off the air. It was horrible. It was horrible.
He did drive himself here. He's a man of the people.
He did. That's true. He flew commercially.
Well, yeah, thank you.
We have Joe Reinagel, the sports director for Ken's 5. We have Elaine Wolff, who's a freelance journalist and former editor of the San Antonio Current, who's working on some mystery project that if she told us, she'd have to kill all of us.
Which make the rest of the show real quiet.
The joke used to be that TSA stood for thousands standing around. The new line is touching sensitive areas. A lot of flack for the combination. Here are your choices now: the full body scan or the full body grope when you go fly at the airport. Is this security theater, or does this actually make us any safer? Anybody?
I'm not convinced that it makes us any safer. I think there's a preoccupation at the passenger. There are more vulnerable spots in the airport, and we saw that at Love Field about 3 months ago, where somebody was driving around on the runway.
Or those packages.
I think that if we're going to spend the resources that we're spending right now to protect people, I think we're overdoing it. There's a diminishing return on the dollar that we're spending as far as adding all of these new systems to protect passengers. The passengers can get killed on the runway. If somebody has access to that runway and they drive out on it, they can run a vehicle into the plane. So I hope that we start looking at it holistically. If we've got some breaches of security on the airport grounds and the operating areas, I think we've done a pretty good job of profiling grandma and giving her a strip search. As far as TSA is concerned, I think we're going beyond what the government should be involved in as far as invasion of people's privacy.
I don't know what was the old system not working. I mean, when you go in there, you put your bags and you walk through the machine. I mean, I didn't hear, was that not working? Was there a reason that we had to go to these drastic measures now that we're going to with the full body scan and the groping as you guys are talking about? I must have missed something. I don't know.
It apparently wasn't catching the specially modified underwear. So
is that what it was?
Yeah. I think one of the concerns I have is that the more you introduce technology, people start to think that technology does the work.
Oh yeah.
So and I think so much of it still has to be about training the people who are one-on-one, kind of making those assessments, looking for things that seem not quite right, or people seem to be acting not quite in keeping with normal travel behavior. So to me, it's just like, well, that can't do all the work for us.
Well, it might also be nice if we didn't hire Officer McCreepy to do the search. I mean, look, these people, isn't this really, when you get right down to it, couldn't we have seen this all coming? Here you have a federal unionized workforce of people who it's almost impossible to fire anybody. And, gee, what a surprise when they're given wide latitude over these airline passengers because we all want to get on the plane. We practically do anything. Now it turns out we are having to do practically anything to get on the plane. I mean, it almost, you could have seen it coming. You form a new bureaucracy. The workers are untouchable. There are vague rules about what they can do. And we're hearing about all kinds of abuses. I'm wondering, it sounded crazy the first time I heard it, just because it's so unorthodox, but I'm almost wondering if this isn't truly something that needs to be privatized, because then you have competitiveness, you have workers who answer to somebody, you can hire and fire them if they're being inappropriate, and you can put incentives in. Hey, you lose the contract if the next underwear bomber or the next shoe bomber gets through your net. I mean, I know the government
that's kind of
thinks,
cold comfort if you have a plane that's gone down.
well,
I mean,
where is our recourse with the TSA if a plane goes down?
I think that's a fair point, but to me that's exactly the sort of job that we want the government doing.
Why?
And because I think that that's something that we look to them to do, and they have, at the end of the day, it's about citizens. It's not about, how much of a profit margin can we build in there, how much can we overbill from what it actually costs to do the job to get this contract, and who, by the way, are we busy lobbying? How are we spending money up in Capitol Hill so that we get that contract?
Federal employees cost more than private sector employees.
I think, if you look at the problems that we've had with military contractors, I don't know why on earth you would think that that would be a good system to put in place for security.
The Deficit Reduction Commission says we need more military
Well, I mean, the
contractors.
example you're using as far as TSA and going to the private sector, if you look at the corrections department, both in Texas and throughout the country, a large part of it is privatized. I have a lot of confidence in the private sector of using innovative approaches in dealing with security issues. This all originated at Logan Logan Airport in Boston. They had box cutters. And those box cutters were put in their carry-on baggage, and nobody stopped them from doing it. And I think right now we've got systems in place to keep somebody from using a sharp object, bringing a gun, and into the passenger areas and creating some imminent harm.
I mean, I'm with Joe. I think we have a lot of things in place already.
And that's where I'm saying overkill. So I agree with the private sector approach. Let's
give
get
them a
some
5-year
RFPs.
Contract, and if we're not happy with the performance, then they don't get the renewal of the contract.
Or take specific airports and let's do pilot programs. Let's see who's more efficient and do a public-private competition. Let's see who is more adept in dealing with the security issues that the American public is asking for. So
but
I don't
Elaine
think
is onto something here, because what she's expressing is we have been brought up to think that this is something the government ought to do. Yet logically, there's no more reason for the government to do this than there is for the government to hire the security guards at the mall.
I think there actually is. I mean, I think there's certain areas, and I mean, I absolutely believe this, there's certain areas in our public life that we do not necessarily, the profit motive is not going to produce a better system, or it doesn't necessarily even belong there as part of the conversation. I think education is one of those areas. Education is not about making a profit for somebody. Education is about hopefully, getting future citizens produced who can, help make us a great country still. But I think that security is just another one of those areas. You are going to have, think about the lobbying that already goes on Capitol Hill. Think about the money that is spent, the lining of pockets. That you would just open up a whole new market where that would happen. And it wouldn't necessarily be about picking the best contract. It would be about picking the contractor who puts in the lowest bid, which doesn't necessarily mean they're doing the best job, and who is also making some Congress people very, very happy when campaign time rolls around.
But at least you have a choice then. Now we have no choice. I mean, who's to say that the people that we're hiring now are the best people?
Well, I think, the problem that Jack was raising, the main concern is, well, these people get hired, and then how do you ever get rid of them? To me, that seems a problem that the new Republican Congress could fix.
Right, that's a small, if
that's the issue. I mean,
they're not going to de-unionize the federal workforce, Elaine. They're not wearing red capes. I mean, we have to decide culturally, I guess is the word, whether things like this have to be or are best handled by the government. Your comfort level is that they would be with the government, but I don't see any basis for that other than just it's always been done that way. The fact that we've always done airports as government installations doesn't mean they have to be government installations.
Well, we have had some horrible breaches of security, but we've also had some fantastic catches, and it is still a very safe way to travel overall. So it's like you're talking about some record of failure that doesn't exist. I mean, an unforeseen, well, it was foreseen by some people in the government who failed to pass along the information, but a largely unforeseen circumstance arose, and by and large, the response to it has been successful because we have not had a repeat of that. So you're talking about there being a failure. I don't see the failure. You're talking about maybe there's one small problem with the sorts of folks who have these jobs, and is there a way to discipline or move them along if they aren't the right fit? But those to me seem to be solvable without completely upending the system and privatizing it.
I'll tell you why there's a failure. There's a failure in two ways. One is that when you travel, we have created a system that does not justify itself. In other words, the delays and the aggravation and the slowdown and the bottlenecking and the fact that businesses are now choosing not to travel because of that is a failure. But I also think there's a real failure of selective enforcement. Now, we have the TSA groping people's butts and breasts, but we had, when I was up in Boston last week, they were writing a story about how one flight school trained 33 illegal immigrant pilots, and these schools violated or flouted TSA regulations that require running foreign flight students' names against various checklists. They
These
didn't
were
do
private.
any of
These
that.
were private flight schools.
It's a private flight school regulated by the TSA, but nothing was done. 33 people given illegal immigrants given their licenses.
So you think that if there was a private oversight agency overseeing the private flight school, that there wouldn't be any graft and everybody would be following
I'm not
the
saying
rules?
it'd be perfect. I'm not
Yeah.
saying any system would be perfect. It's time to try something different than a government bureaucracy. That's what I'm suggesting. And look, if we're wrong, we'll all rush back to the Elaine Wolff model of let the government do it. But if we're right, we'll ask ourselves, why didn't we try this sooner?
Look, first of all, we don't rush anything in the federal government. It takes years and years to get stuff done. I'm unconvinced that there's a problem here that can be better addressed by privatizing that system.
I think the private sector can do a better job. They're going to be more innovative. They're going to use technology to their benefit. If they can cut their workforce, they're going to do it because they have a profit motive. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a profit motive in dealing with contracts. They lay out a request for proposal. They lay out everything that they're going to do as far as what the policies are going to be and what the objective is. And I don't, anytime that anybody tells me that the government does a better job than the private sector, I disagree with them, because I've sat there and watched inefficiencies at all levels, whether it be from the infrastructure development, from the park system, whatever it is. The private sector can do as good or better job than what the government can do.
I don't think that when you're making a decision about what kind of staffing you need at an airport security station, I think the only consideration has to be the safety level, not whether or not you are making a profit or coming in under the contract bid that you made, or making the amount of money you thought you would make, and the difference between your bid and what you promised your shareholders you'd come away with. So that's my concern.
I mean, as far as the throughput, and Jack's saying there's a lot of folks that are upset or they're frustrated with it takes so long to go through the process. If there's a way we can expedite the throughput and bring people in there safely, I think the private sector is going to look at that more so than let's hire more TSA agents. Whether it be technology or whether it's how you queue people in and out of the systems, the private sector is going to look at it because they realize that their contract extension is going to be based on the performance that they render for the term of the contract. So I think they're going to get a lot more aggressive and a lot more creative in how they address the existing issues that people are concerned about.
And I think we need to be concerned, Elaine, when you say nothing's happened or the system's working, just because there hasn't been a plane blown out of the sky doesn't mean we should be comfortable with these repeat cases. All through the Bush administration, there were whistleblowers saying, you're not regulating these flight schools. Everywhere we look, all around the country, repeated cases of illegal immigrants getting flight training, or in other cases, people coming in under very suspicious circumstances, getting jetliner qualified but not having any airline job to go to, and then leaving the country.
Right.
What is that for? I mean, maybe that won't come to fruition for several years, and maybe it won't even come to fruition in the United States or in our skies, but there's something very, very wrong. There are huge loopholes in this system if that's happening. And if you're going to tell me it has to be a federal approach, then I'm going to say start over again, scrap the TSA and start over again, because this is not working.
Well, the rules have to come